Welcome into another edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. Purdue went through their spring showcase last week, and this week it's the last of the portal, at least for now, until that window opens up again, which it keeps doing. We'll get a full spring report from Tom Dienhart and then jump over to Brian Newberg to talk all about the exciting hoops news on that side of the ledger. But before we jump into this Tuesday edition of the show, a special tip of the cap and thank you to our terrific Gold and Black sponsors. That list includes Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler up. East End Grill and Ripple and Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. This Midwestern oasis at the Whitaker Inn is perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermakers scientists from all across the university, conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. Let's go ahead and get right to Tom Dienhart, as we missed you last week, Tom, because of the basketball news and, the transfer stuff, right? It's just constant. Like, normally speaking, there's not a lot to talk about hoops wise on April 21st, but because of this new age of college athletics, we're spending a lot of time talking about college hoops and understanding, while we kind of get into our conversation, that this is the new world also for college football. I think I speak for many here. I've just had a lot of trouble this spring keeping track when we basically have zero familiarity with these players. Even for a guy that's there every day. Is it a challenge when everything feels new basically all the time?
Yeah, a lot of new names come across to your screen, and you learn who's going to be visiting here. You try to get all the information you can about those guys who are making their trips, and then some guys commit. So yeah, it takes effort. Obviously, it's a whirlwind. The machinations, the tumult, the change. It's just the era that we are now in, Derek. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish it was still 1985, to be honest with you. I'll take 1995, even 2005 for that matter. But yeah, just a lot of change. And for Purdue, the roster churn, unlike any in West Lafayette. In the December window, Derek, they brought in 29 guys from the portal. And now we're in the April portal window, and I think the number could be really close to another 29 guys coming in. So let that sink in for a minute, okay? You could have upwards of 60 players from the portal on the 105-man roster come August 30th when this team kicks off, not far from where I'm talking to you, on August 30th against Ball State.
It's absolutely wild. It really is. And, speaking of the transfers, I think we went down this road last year, so we know not to put the cart in front of the horse, because I know there's still some PTSD from the SEC transfers that the previous staff missed on. But Braden Joyner, I mean, you're talking about a guy that carried all freshman accolades, had meaningful starting experience, two things absolutely needed for a roster, like you mentioned, that has turned over almost completely. How big of a get is that for Barry Odom and his staff?
Yeah, I think he's probably, of the 8 commitments they have from the portal right now, he's the guy I think is the biggest get. Although the linebacker, the very first commit they got, Sanders Ellis from Tennessee State, was a pretty big get as well. But yeah, Braden Joyner, like you said, Derek, all SEC freshman last year at Auburn, a 6'2", 330-pound road grader. I don't think it's an overstatement to say he's probably going to be a starter, Derek, probably one of the guard spots here for an offense that we know Barry Odom wants to be physical, able to run the football, punch defenses in the nose. A great addition up front. They got another big offensive lineman, too. Kid from Indiana State and Tulane, Jude McCoskey. 6'8", Derek. He's 6'8", 300 pounds. You're not going to miss this guy. He's going to be the first guy off the bus every Saturday. So I wouldn't be shocked when it's all said and done here, my friend, if that offensive line doesn't have the most portal additions in April. Maybe upwards, maybe, 5 or 6 possibly. So keep that on your mind. The first two could be several offensive linemen coming from the portal. And then, of course, maybe the biggest storyline of all so far, the return of Ryan Brown, the quarterback, back in West Lafayette. You can't keep somebody away from West Lafayette, Derek. It is nirvana. It's sacred ground, and he just couldn't stay away, could he?
No bias on your part in saying that, right, Tom? No bias at all. That does not mirror anybody's personal story that is talking right now in this podcast. No, but talking about Ryan Brown, kidding aside, And we talked about the quarterback situation. Doesn't this tell you all you need to know about the quarterback? There are 4 guys in that room, and Ryan Brown is willing to come in late in the spring and be like, hey, sign me up. I'm ready to go. I mean, that tells you all you need to know right there, that it's wide open, right?
Yeah, I tried to be as objective as I could all spring. I wasn't alone in my opinion in thinking that Purdue needed to get somebody out of the portal as far as the quarterback position goes. No disrespect to the guys who competed. I just don't think there's anybody who's really ready to be a starter in the Big Ten right now. They brought in Malachi Singleton from Arkansas, E.J. Colson came in from Central Florida, Evans Chuba from Washington State, and then they had the holdover Bennett Meredith. Those are your 4 main competitors all spring. They all had their moments, Derek. Honestly, most observers thought Bennett Meredith may have been the best quarterback all spring, the holdover, who wasn't even a recruit of Barry Odom. Singleton had a solid spring as well. And you're right, there was just no clarity there at quarterback. And I think the internal debate swung to, hey, we got to go get a quarterback. And they got a quarterback. Here's Ryan Brown. He's back, 6'4", 215 pounds. You were in Champaign last year, right?
I didn't go to that game, but I did watch because it was one of the very few, very entertaining games that Purdue played during the 2024 season.
I think we saw the full array of what he's probably capable of doing in the afternoon. Almost 300 yards passing. He had over 100 yards rushing. I talked to Ryan on Saturday morning before I think he was at the Indianapolis airport getting ready to go back to North Carolina. And he said he spent a lot of time with the coaches watching film when he got here on Thursday and Friday. And they must have heard everything they wanted to hear, that this is a guy that's a fit for the offense. And you know what, too, Derek? Last year, when he started those 2 games against Oregon and Illinois, you got the sense that the teammates really like this kid. That intangible factor, an infectious personality. He's a leader. Everybody was so happy that he was going to get this chance. And that really told me a lot to see how his peers reacted to him. So I think there's going to be some good vibes as well. And, it's supposedly an open competition, right? But let us be serious here. I think the betting favorite's got to be Ryan Brown in that job, right?
Yeah, and am I right in saying if the skills are all even, then don't those intangibles and the experience of starting in the Big Ten put him slightly over the top in that race?
Yeah, you'd think so for sure. You're right. He doesn't have a wealth of experience. He was a redshirt freshman last year.
Sure.
You're right, but he does have more experience than anybody that's currently on the roster at quarterback. And he brings a lot. I think he's, like I said, a fit skill-wise here. He's excited to be back as well. And now the work begins to try to surround him with some better talent. I talked about the offensive line. Expect more help there. Wide receiver, Derek. They got 1 kid out of the portal already, an Indianapolis kid who was at Tulsa's coming home to play for Purdue, Corey Smith. I wouldn't be shocked if we get a handful of receivers that come in here as well. I think you could get at least 1 tight end in addition to those receivers. So, yeah, they got their quarterback with a lot more work to do in the portal here before it's all said and done.
I know there are holes to fill everywhere, but are there fewer holes to fill defensively with how they stack up right now, or where are they at on that side of the ball, Tom?
I think the only position that you won't see a portal addition will be running back. I think that room is set with Maccabee and Malachi Thomas, the kid from Virginia Tech, Jaheim Merriweather, Antonio Harris. I think they're pretty well set there. And they got a good running back coming in from Elkhart too. That I like a lot, Jerron Thomas. But defensively, I think you're going to see a good amount of players come in. I think maybe not quite as many on offense. We've already seen some defensive line help come in, and I know that they're looking at some other D linemen. The 1 linebackers here already. I talked about Sanders Ellis. Defensive back, they have 1 DB so far. So, there may not be quite as many bodies needed on defense at this point as there are on offense. But still, this is a roster that's like that we all can see is rapidly under construction right before our very eyes.
Yeah, and April is not August, but in the past, you would have at least some sort of a grasp on where a program was coming out of the spring. But are we basically just in a soft reset right now after the spring? Because look, the quarterback wasn't even on the roster right in the spring. I know he was on the team last year, but potentially your starting quarterback wasn't. And then there are still some guys coming and going in the next week or so. It just feels like we're going to have to reset again before we get to summer camp. No?
You're right. I think you're exactly right. Well, they had 20 players leave, Derek. So 20 guys that went through spring football are gone. They're going to pack their bags and they've entered the portal. Some other guys have left the program that aren't going to enter the portal. So that number is going to be well over 20 as far as guys who went to spring football who are going to be gone. And we've just alluded and we just started to bring in these guys from the spring portal window. They won't get there obviously till May or June, but you're right. It's going to be a whole new acclimation period here. Summer is going to be awfully important, obviously, for these guys, the newcomers, to start to get acclimated, to learn the playbook, to develop chemistry with their teammates. So it's going to be huge. It's just another function of modern day college football here. Everybody's going to have to learn on the fly and get up to speed quickly here. Because you know what, training camp is going to be here before we know it. And it's these coaches' jobs to make sure these guys are up to speed, these newcomers from the portal, and can hit the ground running for obvious reasons. These guys aren't here to develop and play in 2026. They got to help right now, obviously.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Tom will keep that notebook filled, and he'll keep his erasers handy as well, because that's the new age of college football where you got to do all that in pencil now, I guess, Tom, right? Instead of permanent ink.
Phone. Guys, I got my Twitter alert set. Hey, Derek, I've got you on Twitter alerts here too, just so you know.
That's right. Oh, got it. Well, I apologize in advance for all the nonsense that I'm going to send your way. Check out Tom's terrific work at goldenblack.com throughout the offseason as he keeps you abreast with everything that's happening with the ever-changing world of Boilermaker football. Thanks so much, Tom, and we'll talk again next week, buddy.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Be good, buddy.
That's our friend Tom Dienhart. Thanks so much for him joining us on the show today. And we'll get to Brian Newbert here in just a second. But first, I want to give a thank you to Sand Valley Resort. Tee times for the 2025 golf season at Sand Valley are now available. Using their online booking platform, it's easier than ever to find availability and experience golf as it was meant to be. Conveniently located in the breathtaking dunes of central Wisconsin, Sand Valley offers a collection of award-winning courses designed by world-renowned architects that are suitable for all skill levels. Visit sandvalley.com and book your tee times online today. From football over to basketball, the season never really ends for our next guest. He's goldenblack.com columnist and basketball knower Brian Newbert, who joins me now on the program. And Brian, a lot happened since we last talked. I mean, you did say that Omar Meyer's commitment was imminent, and of course that ended up happening. And then bang, right after that, it felt like, I think it was hours later, Liam Murphy makes his pledge for Purdue as well. Thought the Meyer one was particularly big because that doesn't just solve an issue for next season, like we see a lot of times in the transfer portal and this win now. You get a guy with pro experience who classifies as a freshman, kind of the ultimate win-win.
Yeah, I think people view the transfer market now as one-year Band-Aids more than anything, but this can really work when you take multi-year guys. And that's not all that different than taking a freshman, keeping him in your program, developing him, building some continuity, building some experience within your program. It's kind of where, back before it was open, immediately eligible transfers, Purdue included, really had a lot of interest in a lot of those sit-out transfers. When you transferred, you used to have to sit out the year in residence, so you essentially redshirted. That was a pretty good deal because you got a good player for a year who you didn't have to worry about being upset about playing time, who was a high major player on your scout team, who was learning your system without having to go out and play in games, getting to know his teammates, playing with the guys he was going to play with. And he's essentially, when he would become eligible, he would be an inexperienced player. And, when you're able to get a freshman, which Omar Meyer is, even though right now he's a professional, those two things kind of fly in the face of one another. What you're getting in him essentially is a freshman with, professional experience. So you have him, theoretically for 4 years. Who knows how things will turn out, but you have him for at least 2 or 3, most likely. So you have a viable backup right now for Braden Smith. That's not to say CJ Cox and Jakari Harris couldn't have done that had you needed them to, but it's always helpful to have as many pure ball handlers, pure point guards on your roster as possible. He's a guy who maybe can play with Braden Smith, too. Purdue moved Braden Smith off the ball a lot this year offensively to try to save some tread on the tires, so to speak, but also to use him in different ways and give defenses more to worry about. But then after this year, he's got multiple years of eligibility left, so he eases right into that. He's your current backup point guard. He's your point guard of the future all at once. And, that day was always going to come where, Purdue has to do the post Braden Smith era the same way they had to do the post Zach Edey era. And, these Braden Smiths are really hard to find. So you were going to have to go out and find somebody in the portal or a really high-end freshman to come in and start right away next year, or go with CJ Cox or Jakari Harris, who were more combo guards. That would have been more like the Eric Hunter model, more the, PJ Thompson. He was more of a point guard than probably a lot of the combo guards Purdue used were. But now you have a pure point guard who can step right in for Braden Smith. That doesn't mean he's going to be Braden Smith right away. But at least he's as close to the next best thing as you're going to get. And you don't have to sit there during the NCAA tournament next year when you're trying to go to a Final Four worrying about recruiting a point guard. So This is a really good deal for Purdue on making no mention whatsoever of the fact that this is a guy who's going to be an NBA prospect, most likely, who is a really high-end recruit. We won't have the rankings or whatever to sort of punctuate that like we always do when we cover high school recruiting. We won't have the offer list necessarily because I'm not sure anybody else really got to recruit him. But he's a professional once again. And, he got invited to the Nike Hoop Summit in Portland, which they don't just let people in off the street to attend. So this was a really, really high level get and, probably a bigger story than we even reflected in our coverage, just because covering international guys is hard.
It's funny this is where we are too, because like you said, I know he's young, but he has pro experience. And I'm old enough to remember when they flipped out about Enes Kanter all those years ago. And they said, hey, wait a minute. You can't play college basketball. You're a professional. And now it's just like, whatever. He's fine. Let's just go ahead and move on. Purdue gains from all of it. So I guess it's a good thing, but I just can't help but sometimes just laugh to think about, where we are right now with this. We know Purdue will have the size that it lacked last year and about as much experience as you can possibly have. When you talk about especially this senior class and all of the college basketball that they played and obviously the top three playing together for large swaths of that, at least when it comes to, those top guys and those two areas, there's still talk about this team lacking elite level athleticism. How much of an issue do you expect that to be next year? We're only talking about them on paper right now. So, you check the box size, you check the box experience, and it's not like they're unathletic. It's just that I think one knock when you look at this roster, you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, they minus Colvin, they minus Heidi. They got more experience. They got bigger. Do they have athletes to match up with some of these teams that are uber athletic?
Yeah, not really. But Purdue very rarely has. I can think of a handful of guys over the years, Jaden Ivey most notably, that were that really, really elite athlete. It's just not what Purdue has typically won with. Purdue has won with IQ, skill, and size. And this team is loaded, and continuity and experience and all that other stuff.
Sure.
This team is loaded with the stuff, at least on paper, that Purdue has historically won with. They're not going to be the most athletic team, but Purdue very rarely has. And you did lose your best athletes, or two of your three best athletes, when taking Braden Smith into account, via Camden Heidi and Miles Colvin leaving. But, when Camden Heidi and Miles Colvin, dunk, when they throw down offensive rebound dunks, or they get out in the open floor and they dunk, that's the same 2 points as Trey Coppin-Wren scoring on a 5-second post up, or Braden Smith making a pull-up jumper off a ball screen. It's really not that big a deal. You'd like to have guys who can really run the floor and really finish at the rim. But Miles Colvin and Camden Heidi's athleticism, how much difference did it really make last season? I always think athleticism is really brought out by energy, and those guys had to have elite energy, and it was there sometimes, it wasn't there other times. They were not the sorts of guys who were going to dribble past closeouts, get to the rim, and make acrobatic finishes. Camden Heidi's did it a few times in his career. I can't think of many instances where Miles Colvin attacked the closeout, got all the way to the basket. He got to his pull-up jumper, which is important, but he didn't really get all the way to the basket. This team, is going to have some offensive savvy in some of those positions that might make up for that burst, might make up for that leaping ability, things like that. And I just don't know how much it matters. Purdue defensively is built to kind of dull quickness and to stay compact and not, really expose itself to the dribble very much. Purdue was bad defensively down the stretch of the regular season because it had gotten away for whatever reason from what worked, not because the coaches didn't want them to do it. They just, for whatever reason, lacked the concentration or lacked the discipline to do it. If Purdue sticks to what it tries to do defensively, it really can take away the advantages that athleticism and quickness would typically give against a less athletic, less quick team. That is, if Purdue is disciplined, if they build on their best days defensively this past season, it's a help-based defense. So I don't really know how much it matters. Typically, you're vulnerable to transition offense when you're big. Purdue's going to be big again. They just have to be good at what they do. They have to be good on the defensive glass. They have to be good in transition defense, and they have to not turn the ball over. That is obviously the most important part of this.
We're talking with Brian Newbert here on Gold and Black Radio. Matt Painter, and I usually don't try to dive into the narratives because the narratives are usually just frustrating and wrong, and in some cases laughably wrong. But, there was talk about him and, well, he doesn't like the portal, right? And then, Purdue has this sort of offseason in the portal where they get Oscar Clough and they get Omer Mayer and they get Liam Murphy, and it looks like they've really built a well-rounded roster. And, we have a 20-year sample size to go on here of Matt Painter. I know that, college basketball right now in 2025 is completely different from college basketball in 2010, much less 2015 or even 2020. But, we've seen defense-heavy teams, offense-heavy teams, bigs get developed, guards get developed. We've seen high-level recruiting. We've seen depth navigation of roster building and now the portal. And I understand that the core tenets of who Purdue is, and you've touched on these, Brian, in our conversation so far tonight, and what they do and what they look like have remained the same. But I think there's sort of this misnomer that maybe nationally even that, Painter's old school and he's kind of stuck in his ways. And I'd kind of argue just looking at the evolution and what he's been able to do here, I think he's done just about as good as a job as any coach in navigating everything that's happened, especially the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, no, I think that he is. I said this on one of our other platforms. They all run together. I don't remember who I was talking to. It was either you or Alan, or it was either wrote it or I said it. It was a podcast. It was video, whatever it was. I have no idea. Perhaps I was just in my backyard screaming at the neighbor's house.
You were talking to your dog.
I do that at least twice a week. I go stand on the corner and I just yell like a crazy homeless person. No, I think Matt Painter is the most adaptable coach in college basketball. When you look at what Purdue's done the last 5 years, and I'm picking the number 5 arbitrarily, I could probably boil it down to a more specific number, but Purdue's had its most successful run in program history here lately, at a time when everybody could transfer and you could literally pay players to come to your school. Those things on paper, any one of us reasonably would have said, hey, that might not hurt Purdue, but that ain't going to help Purdue.
Yeah.
And look what's happened ever since then. You had 3 straight teams reach number 1 in the country. You won 3 straight Big Ten titles. You went to a Final Four. You played for a national title. You're going to be a top 5 team again this coming season. Purdue has been able to not only adapt but use all this stuff to its advantage. Purdue, if they're recruiting a kid and that kid asks for money first, that helped Purdue filter out the kids to whom the stuff that's important to Purdue is important to them. That can't possibly have been a well-constructed sentence. It acted as a really good evaluation tool for Purdue because it boiled up players' priorities to the surface where they couldn't hide, and Purdue could pick its battles in recruiting better. It made it easier to identify their guys. It made it easier to get their guys, because all of these other schools that normally would be watching sophomores and even freshmen in the summers or during the season were detained recruiting transfers. And it really helped Purdue because they were like the lone voice out there on a lot of those guys early, and it helped them continue that trend of them getting their guys early and never really having to fight all that hard to get them because there was nobody else involved. I'm not minimizing what Purdue did there by saying the competition wasn't what it would have been had those kids decided later. But it really did work to Purdue's advantage, and that's kind of ironic's not the right word, but it's really interesting. The misperception about Purdue all along has been that Matt Painter is distinctly anti-transfer. He is anti-transfer in the sense that he doesn't want to go get 5 guys every year, and he doesn't want to have to recruit his best players every single year. But he has no aversion whatsoever. He hasn't had any aversion whatsoever to getting what he needs to help make his team as good as it can be. You saw that with Lance Jones. Purdue was recruiting graduate transfers for years before there was even a portal. So it's just not accurate that he doesn't want transfers. He doesn't think this is how it should be. It's just not accurate. And, this was a year where, look, you played out this whole season, and it was brutally apparent what Purdue needed. What held it back all season long, prevented it from doing really big things this past season. They needed to get bigger. They were prohibitively small all season long. They had to get big. And, Matt Painter's out recruiting Oscar Clough before the NCAA tournament's even run its course, which is, the urgency with which he showed that particular recruitment told you this was absolutely necessary. And there was no shying away from that. I wouldn't call Omer Mayer a transfer because he's not technically a transfer. But that's a big springtime addition. Liam Murphy was simply we lost 2 guys. We got to replace them. Mm-hmm. We need somebody to back up Trey Kaufman-Renn at the 4 because we have no one else. Right now, Raleigh Burgess obviously is hurt. So, what he has done is he's been really aggressive in making sure this team, which is capable of anything and everything, at least on paper, as good as it possibly can be, but also filling holes that the nature of college basketball nowadays are going to present probably on a pretty regular basis.
Last thing, and you've probably heard these names because you're in it every day, and I feel like, oh yeah, like I forgot about these two. How do Jack Benter and Antoine West fit into all this? The reason I asked is I saw West jumped into the top 100 of one recruiting service just recently. Not that, that's the end all be all, but we talk about the portal additions and things like that. And then I'm like, oh wait, like there's some young players that like have followed traditional means that are also on the roster as well. How do those two fit in for 25-26?
Well, Jack Benter is going to have every opportunity to be in their rotation. They love Jack Benter. Like he is the prototypical, Purdue offensive skill guy, that Dakota Mathias, that Ryan Klein, that Fletcher Lawyer, that guy they always have who can really shoot, but can also really handle the ball, really pass, and really beat you with his brain, for lack of a better way of putting it. A guy who just has a great feel for the game, fits well in offensive structure. He's going to have every opportunity to get minutes at the 3. I've heard some rumblings about them maybe even being able to play 4 guards. Where those minutes would come from, I have no idea. But in that situation, Jack Benner conceivably could be a small ball 4. They've tried that in the past with some guys. I don't see why you would do it proactively this particular year, but if you want to put all shooters around like size. Now, again, the minutes aren't necessarily there, but I think there's a couple spots Jack Benner could conceivably fit into this year. And then after this year, when a lot of all your best players kind of clear out and your next generation has to fill some gaps, Jack Benner is going to be a big part of that next generation. He might be the guy who steps right in for Fletcher Lawyer after Fletcher Lawyer. Antoine West, time is on his side. Like Purdue really likes him. They really like his ability to create shots, to score, to play a couple different backcourt positions. But do you need him right now? Probably not. I don't want to speculate because this is months in down the line, but make all the sense in the world to redshirt him. And something to keep in mind here, guys. If you're getting paid in revenue sharing, you're getting paid to redshirt now. And I think that's if there was ever any distaste on players' part for doing that, players who might not necessarily understand at 18 years old the big picture of this, that's a pretty good incentive. If you need an extra incentive, again, he'll have every opportunity to come in and compete for minutes, but with Omer Mayer coming in, with your 2 seniors in the backcourt, with Sha'Carri Harris and C.J. Cox, both bound for even bigger roles this year. It just, there's a lot of guys there. Jack Benner coming into the mix, there's a lot of guys there. So I would speculate that it would make a lot of sense for when push comes to shove. And this won't be decided till like October. I'm always the one talking about it months before because it's our job to kind of look ahead at stuff, but it would make all the sense in the world. Now, that said, Antoine West comes in June, maybe lights the world on fire. Anything can happen. I've seen it before. Ryan Klein was going to redshirt, didn't redshirt. Purdue probably wished he did now in hindsight. Zach Edey was bound for redshirt when Matt Harms transferred in the spring. That changed the complexion of that. But Zach Edey was recruited to redshirt. Ryan Klein was recruited to redshirt. So sometimes these things look one way now, but then they change for one reason or another thereafter. I thought Raleigh Burgess was going to redshirt last year. He did not. Doesn't mean he can't now. That's probably something else they'll have to consider down the line, especially if Raleigh Burgess doesn't, get healthy fast enough to really make that year 1 to year 2 jump. And but it would make sense. But we are way ahead of the card is way ahead of the horse here by us talking about it. But it does make sense. So I'll just kind of leave it there.
You can check out all of Brian's latest work. He's got a comprehensive basketball prospectus up right now at goldenblack.com. He did a mailbag, which is always kind of dangerous. So you can check out Brian's mailbag as well.
The best graphic in sports. The greatest graphic in sports media. If you know, you know.
A mailbag one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know this one. I don't know this reference.
You'll have to check it out.
Oh, man.
Click on
I know
it.
I know the Late Show, David Letterman. We get letters, but I don't know the I'm gonna look that up. Letters. I'll make sure I won't do that on my work computer there. Goldenblack.com. The coverage never ends for Brian Newbert if you want to check that out. Appreciate it as always, my man, and we will catch up with you again soon here.
No sweat, Derek. Thanks, man.
That's our friend Brian Newbert, and that is our show for this Tuesday. I'm going to look up that mailbag reference. Now I feel like it's on my toes there. I was like, wait, I don't know if I know that reference. I do know all of our great sponsors who make this show possible. We want to give them a shout out once again before we exit stage left. That includes the Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans. East End Grill and Ripple and Company, 2 distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort. Tee times for the 2025 golf season at Sand Valley are now available. Visit sandvalley.com and book your tee times today. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research, which has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. I mentioned all of Brian's great coverage. I mentioned all of Tom's great coverage earlier. You got to sign up to be a member. Then you can read everything. You never have to worry about a paywall or anything like that. You get Knucklehead Central, you get mailbags, you get anything and everything at goldenblack.com by signing up to become a member today. So if you're not already, please do so. Thanks so much for listening to this edition of Golden Black Radio, and we will see you next week on these same exact podcast platforms.